One day King Pharaoh awoke in his bed. He looked out the window and here's what he said. Oy vey, the Nile has turned red. Red here, red there. Red was flowing everywhere. One day King Pharaoh awoke from his bed. There were frogs in his bed. There were frogs on his head, frogs on his nose, and frogs on his toes. Frogs here, frogs there. Frogs were jumping everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. There were lice in his bed. There were lice on his head, lice on his nose, and lice on his toes. Lice here, lice there. Lice were biting everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. There were beasts in his bed. There were beasts on his head, beasts on his nose, and beasts on his toes. Beasts here, beasts there. Beasts were howling everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. All the cattle were dropping dead. They dropped on their nose, they dropped on their toes. Dying here, dying there. Cattle were dying everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. There were boils in his bed. There were boils, ow, on his head. Boils on his nose and boils on his toes. Boils here, boils there. Boils were itching everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. There was hail in his bed. There was hail on his head, hail on his nose, and hail on his toes. Hail here, hail there. Hail was falling everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. There were locusts in his bed. There were locusts on his head, locusts on his nose, and locusts on his toes. Locusts here, locusts there. Locusts were hopping everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. In the middle of the day, it was dark instead. It was dark on his nose and dark on his toes. Dark here, dark there. Darkness covered everywhere. One day King Pharaoh woke from his bed. He saw God's angel over his head. This time Pharaoh gave a great shout. Moses, 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 get your people out!